something will come up in a second saying recording. Does that give me a nod if that's come up? That you are recording. Wonderful. Okay, hello to everyone at NLCS Jeju. I've got here some of the students at NLCS London who are involved in various eco activities. So they're going to answer your questions. They're going to introduce themselves to you, say a little bit of what they do. So Caroline, what are you involved in and which question are you going to answer?
So at school, I guess I've been involved in something that we helped set up called the London Schools Eco Network, of which NLCS London was one of the first members. And this is basically just a sort of eco coalition between lots of different schools in London with young students representing each of their schools, talking about the issues that we face within London and beyond, and trying to inspire different movements within schools, such as adopting different green badges, planting gardens, you know, getting rid of maybe beef, which is what we've done at NLCS London. And I'm going to be talking a bit about questions 4 and 5.
Cool. So tell us what question 4 is and tell us your thoughts.
Okay, so we as students ourselves do and how we can influence our family. And even though I was part of this stuff at school, for quite a while I didn't feel like I was doing enough because I hadn't made any sort of radical change to my life, which is what you sort of think of when you're saying make environmental changes personally. But I think that even just doing stuff on a school level or on a local level is enough. Like, you're making an impact, even if you're just a member of your school eco team and helping design messages and posters, that is a change. But if there is something you want to do, like in January, my New Year's resolution was to stop eating meat, and my family was not very happy with me because kind of very carnivorous family. But like, we've definitely reduced how much meat we consume now, and we've bought new cookbooks and all of that. So I guess if you want to make that shift, buying the books and encouraging your family to like take the recipes, maybe making some simple ones if you have younger siblings who are just used to eating, you know, chicken with pasta, that's an idea.
Cool. I think that's a really nice illustration of something that sometimes gets called the ripple effect. Have any of you heard of that? And do you want to explain what do you want to pop a hand up? And you can just actually literally put your hand up. Does anyone know what we mean when we talk about Caroline kind of explain an example here of the ripple effect? Caroline, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, sure. I think it's about how even if you're one person, same as the butterfly effect in history, a small change can have a big impact. So I guess with me, it was just I reduced the amount of, well, I still eat fish, but I don't eat meat anymore. And now my family and my siblings eat a lot less, simply because accommodating for my cooking made it harder for them to buy more. So you can make a difference.
Absolutely. I think that's an awesome message to show that we all kind of have our sphere of influence, and changes we make kind of ripple out. Fantastic. Salma, hello. You're in year 8, aren't you? Tell us, do you want to mention quickly about the eco reps, because you're one of our active eco reps?
Yeah, so I'm an eco rep, and one of the things that I've been involved in recently is fast fashion. So basically I've been helping raise awareness in my form and my year about what fast fashion is and how we can stop contributing to it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and answer question 7.
Go for it.
Okay, so the question is about gardening and if we do any of that kind of stuff at NLCS London. And my answer is we have a lot of landscape and a lot of healthy plants, and we also have some clubs that kind of promote gardening and growing things naturally, just like wherever you are. So
I think lockdown here in the UK, I'm not sure what lockdown's been like in Jeju, but has anyone here been more interested in gardening since kind of lockdown started? I know lots of people in the UK have sort of been turning to it as a new hobby, which has been really cool. Fantastic, thanks, Salma. Alina, you are our new chair of the Environmental Awareness Society. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have an environmental awareness society in year 13, and we also have a year 11 green team, and so I was also head of that last year. And so both of them collectively together, we've come up with many new initiatives and many ideas to see how we can all be more eco, both as individuals but also as a whole school. And I'll also be talking about question 5. So I personally, I live near Hampstead Heath, which is an area of green space, kind of like a big area of woodland. And recently I've seen more foxes and more birds and really lots of wildlife around. So that's been really nice. So in terms of destruction of the environment, I've seen a bit more littering recently, which is a shame. But mainly now because of COVID-19, and not many people are going on walks and enjoying the kind of woodlands that we have. I think they're starting to appreciate it more. And because there's less pollution, because less people are driving or taking transport that pollutes, I think we're seeing more birds coming out and more wildlife. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, definitely. There's been lots of articles in the UK about how people have been appreciating their sort of natural surroundings. Have any of you got any examples of how you've enjoyed, during this period of lockdown, enjoyed nature a little bit more? Any anecdotes?
Yeah, definitely. I started going to the park a lot more often. It's actually walking distance from my house, but I didn't used to walk there very often. And I started climbing trees. So I do that quite often now. I sit in trees and I listen to music and enjoy the nature and the sound of the birds sometimes. It's really nice. How
cool. I love it. I love it. Lena and Caroline, do you want to talk about some of the sort of activism you've been involved in terms of, we talked about the ripple effect, and I know that you've gone a bit further and sort of had some contacts with politicians as well. Do you think it's important that we engage, we have a kind of top-down approach at the same time as having a bottom-up approach? Maybe Caroline, you go first, then Alina.
Sure. I mean, I think it's important that the two go hand in hand. I think having a wide variety of students at a school working bottom up to inform others and working amongst their peers is important. But at the same time, I think in order to get widespread change, you do need top-down organizations such as the government or NGOs to be spreading awareness. And so I guess what Alina and I have been doing is, as part of the London Schools Eco Network, we then went on to become Youth Climate Ambassadors for the Youth Climate Summit in 2020, which was this big nationwide event that a company called Gap, I don't know what the
charity is called Gap.
Yeah, I can't remember what the abbreviation stands for anymore, but Global Action Plan, there we go. And so they were kind of doing top-down work, working with schools to help them raise awareness and creating workshops. So Lena and I did that. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Caroline said. We also, as part of the London Schools Eco Network, we wrote letters to our local MPs, and my MP actually replied. And so I basically urged her to take a green COVID recovery, like as we move on, and try to get back to normal. Whatever that may be. So she replied and she invited me to a Zoom call with other key constituents. And so we basically talked about ways that we thought as individuals we could have an impact. And so one of the things that we thought of was widening bicycle lanes. So she actually went back and to Parliament and tried and basically suggested that, and it actually went through. So now I think in a couple of years or so, I think many places are going to have wider bicycle lanes. So that should encourage more people to cycle. And yeah, as Caroline was saying, we're part of the London Schools Eco Network, and I also represent that network in the UK Schools Eco Network, which is basically where all these small networks come together and we try and come up with new ideas and initiatives, not only as what schools can do, but also how we can urge politicians and other policymakers to really make a good green change.
I think that's a really awesome example of like strength in numbers, with all of these different groups coming together. Collectively they can have a really big voice and make these changes. But equally, by just sending letters to politicians, you've been able to have that interaction. So we can make a difference kind of as a big group, but equally we could all make this difference sort of on a case-by-case basis. Gabby, you're also on the new committee for our sixth form Environmental Awareness Society, and I think you're our publicity manager, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm Gabby. Yeah.
And you're going to tell us about question 3. So what's that about?
Question 3 is about how London has become more eco-friendly over the past 10 years. I think the main thing to think about is the introduction of the congestion charge when you drive into central London. So you have to pay a fine if you're going to drive into central London, which is really good and means a lot more people are taking public transport to work or cycling, which is really good to reduce fossil fuel emissions from cars. Yeah.
Absolutely. Caroline, what are you saying?
The Mayor of London, I think, has been so the new Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, I think he did a lot with Transport for London to encourage people to use public transport and to try and make, buses and the tube system more accessible to people. So that was a big thing.
Sama, do you want to mention a couple of the things that we do at NLCS London? We're not a boarding school. So Sama, can you maybe mention a few of the initiatives and the messages that we have about travelling to school sustainably?
Well, I know we talk about congestion around the school a lot, and obviously that's causing a lot of pollution in our area. So we try and get people to walk to school or cycle or even take some sort of public transport, but if you live close, not to take the car, because that's really bad for the environment.
Yeah, definitely. We have lots of problems with congestion because we're in quite a sort of busy neighbourhood. That links quite nicely on to the question about air pollution, which Ananya was going to talk about. Tell us about what we're doing to try and combat air pollution.
Yeah, so at this school, I think we're hoping to put in an air quality monitor soon, which will help us know if our efforts in reducing congestion around the school are helping reduce air pollution levels. As for London as a whole, there's definitely much more of a pollution problem in central London, hence the congestion charging zone. But I think lockdown has improved air quality, and there's been a rise in interest in cycling and walking, which is reducing the number of cars on the road.
I found it really interesting that the student who wrote question 10 has said that some days in Jeju we're not allowed outdoor activities because the pollution is so bad. Now, luckily, the pollution hasn't got to those kind of levels in London, but is it something that you guys are concerned about? Gabby, what do you think?
I guess there is a fear that it could, if we don't make more changes, it could someday reach that.
Yeah, definitely. I think air pollution is an interesting one because it's kind of invisible, so it's one that's quite easy to ignore. Caroline, you were going to tell us. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and also just to add into that, I think Global Action Plan, the company who organised the Youth Climate Summit, I think Alina and I are both still ambassadors for them, and they're currently working on a new London-wide project, or even, is it going to get global as well? I think it's
definitely currently London-wide. Yeah, really focusing on air pollution. That's actually something, I haven't told you guys this yet, but that's going to be a key focus of the London Schools Eco Network, is trying to encourage schools in London to install these pollution monitors and work with this charity to particularly improve air quality near to schools. Cool. And Caroline, you were going to touch on something else. What was that?
Just, I think, leading on from what Alina said earlier about the environmental degradation. So I guess you guys have air pollution. I think in and around London, it isn't so bad because we've got a lot of green spaces. There are a lot of parks, but I do a lot of sports which are in close contact with nature, such as surfing and skiing. And in that regard, I've definitely noticed changes over my youth, I guess, over how much it's changed. So water temperatures in the Atlantic Ocean, they've been rising quite a lot. It used to be very cold. Now there's a lot more warm days in the summer. Last summer, we had a day where it was 40 degrees or more, which is just not normal for the south of France. And like the places where I normally ski, some of the glaciers have been melting and retreating. So I definitely can empathize with the feeling of the fact that nature is leaving.
But we're all doing what we can to do any of you want to talk about maybe aspects of getting involved in sort of environmental work that you've particularly enjoyed? Is there anything that you've learned from it, or anything that you've found surprising? Or are there any aspects of it that you find difficult, do you think? Any volunteers?
Maybe just a question for the Jeju students, but I have noticed that a lot more girls do environmental work than boys. And I was just wondering, at Jeju, are you guys a girls team? Because obviously we're a girls team at school, but even within like the London Schools Eco Networks and with all the like youth ambassador reps, 99% girls.
Very, very interesting question. Brilliant. Did anyone want to highlight anything else? Perhaps highlight anything that we do at NLCS that might be of interest, or any? We will put together a set of questions and pop those in an email. Definitely including that one, Caroline. I think that's a great one to include. But does anyone have any final thoughts? Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much to the Jeju students for those questions. I know there are a couple that we didn't get around to, but we can perhaps, if this has been useful and interesting, perhaps we can record a second video for you guys where we answer those. And yeah, we're really excited to hear your responses to our questions. We'll pop those over. Bye, guys.
Oh, we're leaving. Oh.